Hi! Welcome to Z-Day 2013 here in Vancouver. We thought this year, instead of you having to come to us, we would come to you. This year we bring to you a free online virtual event for you to enjoy in the comfort of your own home. So come on, join us. As you may know, Vancouver is noted as being one of the most livable cities in the world. Let's see how true that is. This year's speakers will include author and physician Dr. Gabor Mate and Zeitgeist Vancouver coordinators Matt Berkowitz and myself, Rachel Yapp, as well as a few other surprises from fellow coordinator Brent. So up first we have for you Matt Berkowitz, who will be talking about the science of economics.
Hi, I'm Matt Berkowitz. I'm a coordinator of the Zeitgeist Vancouver team, as well as a spokesman for our local chapter and part of the Zeitgeist Movement global lecture team. Today I want to discuss a science of economics. Have you ever stopped to consider whether or not the economic system that rules our global society could qualify as a science? And if it can't be, why doesn't it? And what would a science of economics actually look like? Would it have any resemblance to our current system? More specifically, how would industry function? How would society be governed? How would business, politics, and the monetary system function? Or are these even valid questions to be asking? These are some questions I hope to answer in this talk. And in order to do so, we're going to have to overcome some tremendous cultural baggage that is currently inhibiting our ability to understand economics as a science. To clarify what I mean by our economic system, I mean the market system of monetary exchange, whereby goods and services are sold in a marketplace for some monetary value, where the seller's goal is the maximization of profit. This is the system that, to one degree or another, is in place more or less in every country in the world. Generally speaking, the purpose of a science of anything is to approximate the natural order of reality, such that our ability to make predictions from these inferred scientific principles is continually advancing. The scientific method itself is a body of techniques for investigating physical phenomena, acquiring new knowledge, and the self-correction of previously ascertained knowledge. We have the hard sciences of physics, chemistry, biology, and so forth, as well as the less exact sciences, but still sciences, of sociology, psychology, and anthropology. But do we have a science of economics? When we understand the methodology of science, it becomes clear that our current economic practices today resemble more of a traditionalized, dogmatic process. Just as the science of medicine should be geared towards maximizing public health, a science of economics would be geared towards maximizing the quality of living of every human on Earth, while ensuring the protection of our environment, including plant and animal well-being. Do we have anything resembling this type of system in place today? Absolutely not. Intrinsic to the profit-maximizing goal of the monetary market system is the need for consumption, and the more of it, the better the economy. If you look up the root of the word economy, it stems from Greek, meaning management of a household, with an emphasis on preserving one's environmental support. By this definition, we currently live in an anti-economic system, far decoupled from any natural world or scientific referent. This example should be enough to prove that we do not operate our society by any scientific protocol. But for the sake of argument, here are some more attributes in which the market system of monetary exchange is predicated on. Starting with cost efficiency. In order to maximize profits, all companies need to adhere to this market principle, which simply refers to the strategy of lowering one's input costs to maximize return. This produces inferior, cheap goods inherently, for no goods can ever be produced at what could be termed peak efficiency. In fact, cost efficiency is inverse to technical efficiency. It also produces strategies of planned obsolescence and intrinsic obsolescence. commonplace strategies of all goods producing companies in existence today. Then there's competition. From companies competing against one another for market share, to people needing to compete against one another for labor, to governments competing against one another for economic dominance. This competition poisons every part of our society, both environmentally and psychologically. Competition is an assumed ingredient of market theory, both in terms of human behavior and, on a macro level, industrial efficiency as a whole. On both accounts, these are highly flawed assumptions. Then there is the priority of scarcity. Very simply, the more scarce something is, the more you can charge for it. This creates a perverse reinforcement to maintain artificial scarcities of life-supporting goods and services for the sake of monetary gain. And the last one I'll touch on, although there are many more, is the need for labor for income. In a system where people need to earn money through employment to purchase goods and services, there is an inherent clash of motives. On one hand, to utilize the highest forms of technology to maximize industrial efficiency, and the other to maintain employment. This is often termed the contradiction of capitalism. Notwithstanding the inefficiency this promotes, it also promotes a waste of human life to engage in activities that have no direct social contribution, but instead only exist to perpetuate the flow of money and the employment that is required to do so. Now, the focus of this talk is to describe the framework of a science of economics rather than to spend too much time identifying the pseudo-scientific dogma of our present one. But first, let's remember that the core mechanism which enables the scientific method to evolve our understanding of reality is self-correction. This is very much an antithesis to the way we operate our society today, which is about institutional self-preservation, whether a business, a religion, or a political entity. The current economic infrastructure is set up with a built-in confirmation bias, slanted in favor of assuming traditionalized concepts and variables for economic operation. Now, when we take the known laws of nature, both on human and habitat levels, and start to calculate what our options and possibilities are technically, without reference to classical and historical assumptions on economic thought, a completely different train of thought emerges. If we wish to orient our society towards maximizing human well-being to the highest level that's technically possible, an entirely different socioeconomic landscape emerges. A reasonable overarching goal could be said to be to maximize human well-being or public health, while ensuring the protection of the environment, and therefore the main goal would thus become maximizing efficiency and thus sustainability. Following this goal, some important strategies emerge that we must follow. Since we need planetary resources to survive, we must pay attention to dynamic equilibrium inherent in natural law. We need to locate and identify all planetary resources we can, as well as implement a system to track our usage of these resources in order to remain sustainable. We would also need to account for rates of regeneration in order to ensure equilibrium, for example, in forestry. Now, given that resources are not uniformly distributed across the planet, we need to implement some sort of approach for this variance in different geographical areas all over the Earth. Systems theory works for this, which recognizes that nature is one huge synergistically connected system and thus treats it as such, rather than an array of countries all competing against one another for monetary economic dominance. So, taking all this inventory and tracking data within a systems theory, logic would dictate that we would have to set up a global resource management system to manage it. This system would essentially be a repository of all resource-related data, their availability, their usage, their rates of renewability, along with foreshadowing external trends which may affect these variables. With that understood, we must then look at the components of management, most specifically production and distribution. In considering production, we need to employ a number of strategies to conform with our goal of maximizing efficiency and sustainability. The most obvious would be that of preservation. We need to make the most diligent use of our finite planetary resources, minimizing waste as much as technically possible, in order to ensure this peak sustainability. Without the opposing force of the priority of profit, which demands consumption at the highest level possible, this strategy will not be inhibited. Rather, it will actually be the underlying framework of a science of economics. Another component of production would be to ensure the protection of the environment at all levels. It makes more sense on this level to utilize resources and technologies which have the lowest negative outputs on the environment as technically possible. We can call this the safety or environmental preservation strategy. And the last major component of production that I'll cover is the actual mechanics of the production itself. Without the need to adhere to waste-producing strategies of cost efficiency like today, we would likely follow three principles when it comes to the creation of products. The first being that every good must be designed to last as long as possible. The second being that when things do break down or are simply no longer usable, we must reuse and recycle as many of the component parts as technically possible. This means product design must incorporate this consideration at the earliest stages. And the third being that technologies that accelerate very quickly and are prone to obsolescence must be designed to foreshadow and accommodate new technological breakthroughs. These three principles, along with others that will become apparent in the future, fall in line with our goal of seeking optimal sustainability for the planet and the world's people. And that brings us to distribution. How would a science of distribution play out with our goal of maximum sustainability? Well, perhaps the first thing to consider is the issue of market globalization today, where we assemble goods all over the world wherever is cheapest and ship them across the whole world. The science of economics would surely have a proximity strategy at the forefront, which sought to localize production as much as possible in order to save energy on transportation. Furthermore, in order to keep track of distribution of goods globally and ensure that demand is met, we must implement a demand and distribution tracking system. This would mirror an inventory system of a big corporate chain today, but instead would be scaled out globally. Insofar as actually physically obtaining the goods, distribution centers could be scattered around proportionally to population densities. A person could come in, take the good for use, and return it if applicable. And where practical, personalized transport could be arranged to people's homes through technologies like pneumatic tubes. So, this global resource management system and production and distribution systems would be unified together, creating one synergistic, dynamic, updating global economic management system which could legitimately be labeled a scientific approach to economics. This empirical, ground-up approach to economic management, all of which is a purely technical process, would be able to provide something to the entire human population never before seen, something that would alleviate a great majority of the social problems caused by our current unscientific economic model, and that is an access abundance. To summarize, this science of economics, which can be termed a resource-based economy, is simply a system where life-supporting understandings are aimed to be met through the most optimized applications of science and technology, with the goal of maximizing efficiency and sustainability on the entire planet. You will notice that politics, money, and business were not mentioned at all in constructing this approach, simply because these institutions are not at all relevant anymore, outgrown based on our newfound understanding of what science and technology can do for us. Money is simply not needed to facilitate exchange, which is based on the assumption of scarcity, because access abundance is now a reality. Politics is no longer relevant, at least in its current incarnation, since the science of economics, like any science, is a purely technical process, devoid of the need for human opinion. A form of government would likely still exist, but would function under a scientifically derived protocol for optimized economic management, rather than a haphazard bureaucracy of law and business-trained politicians who have no technical understanding. Now, there are a number of other issues I could touch on to show this train of thought, or how this train of thought could be extrapolated or applied to other areas of society, like city design, labor and machine automation, transportation, and the education system, as well as how human behavior would change. But for the sake of brevity, I'll pause here. Much more information can be found at thezeitgeistmovement.com, where the train of thought, which comprises a science of economics, is much more fully deduced. Thank you very much.
Hi, my name's Rachel Yapp, and I'll be giving a talk about values. As someone who is aware of the Zeitgeist movement already knows, a social value change is required to change our society for the better. Lectures have been given before this one that discuss at length certain values that need reassessing, such as competition versus cooperation, the way we view criminals, and the role genetics really play in our day-to-day lives. However, I feel it is seldomly discussed how to actually go about changing these values. Part 1. What are values? How have they changed in history? And why are they so important? To start with, I'd like to clarify what I mean by the term value. I do not simply mean monetarily beneficial or anything similar, as noted by the first 9 meanings in dictionary.com. I mean the ideals, customs, institutions, etc. of a society toward which the people of the group have an affective regard. Also noted is that these values may be positive, such as affection, or negative, such as abandonment. It is difficult and somewhat dangerous to consider a value in dualistic terms, such as good or bad. For example, is agreeing with murder a negative value to hold? What if it's the murder of, say, a cancer cell, or the administration of euthanasia to a desperate sufferer of motor neuron disease? Likewise, are certain values always positive, such as cleanliness, when this obsession with cleanliness forces one into compulsive behaviour? I think it's much more reasonable and realistic to think of values on a sliding scale, similar to Sam Harris's moral landscape, and measure them in relation to the volume of benefit or harm they cause either an individual or society as a whole, or, ideally, both symbiotically. Whilst researching material for this lecture, I came across a great website, it's valuesandframes.org, which looks in detail at human values. Okay, so first of all, why are values important? Social and environmental concern and action, it turns out, are based on more than simply access to the facts. This basically means that it is the people's value system that motivates and dictates their behaviour. The website previously mentioned reports findings from a study from decades of research and hundreds of cross-cultural studies. Psychologists have identified a number of consistently occurring human values. The study found that there are a number of human values that occur globally, and they managed to arrange them into this diagram. All the values on the list are held by each of us, but to varying degrees. The values closest to each other are often held most importantly by certain people, and the values furthest away from each other are often held at polar opposite ends of the importance spectrum. For example, someone who holds the notion of freedom, as it is idyllically thought of, in high esteem, will most likely hold issues of national security as a much lower priority, and so on. They were then able to arrange the mind map into what's called Schwarz's value circumplex. They were able to divide the values along 2 major axes: self-enhancement, which is putting the self first, versus self-transcendence, putting others first, and openness to change, readiness to grow, versus conservation values, upholding tradition, preservation of the past, and resistance to change. We all have a bit of each category inside us, but it shows the inner conflict quite well for these purposes. Values are held intrinsically, centred on inherently rewarding pursuits, and extrinsically, centred on external rewards and approval. Intrinsic values can be things like relationships with friends and family, connection with nature, concern for others, and self-acceptance. Whereas extrinsic values can be things like material success, concern about image, and social status. Before going any further, I think it's important to address how values have changed in the past, and how they affect our behaviour. To quote Matt Dillahunty, host of TV show Atheist Experience, our values don't exist inside a vacuum. Simply put, our values affect everything we do, decisions we make, and our relationships with the people around us. We can't disassociate. This is why addressing a harmful value system is vital if we wish to evolve into a healthy society. Here are some examples of how values have changed in the past, not always in a positive sense. Example 1, television in Fiji. According to the findings of a study conducted in Fiji concerning the introduction of television, adolescent females showed a dramatic change in their values concerning body image and social competition after a mere 3 years of its introduction. The increase in exhibition of these extrinsic values has also been related to the dramatic increases in eating disorders in the country. Whether they intended or not, groups can also influence societal values, not only media, but businesses or political and social movements. For example, the anti-slavery, women's and labour movements all played a significant role in creating values such as equality and social justice in policy, law, and wider society. One study showed that between 1968 and 1971, equality increased in importance from 7th to 3rd ranked value amongst US citizens, and suggests the civil rights movement played a key role in this change. What is strikingly clear from these studies is that not only does environment affect value systems, but value systems affect society and the overall environment, like a continuing circle. Therefore, the values we hold individually do have an effect on the world we live in. Part 2. Values and their links with addiction. During my time researching this topic, I was reading Dr. Gabor Mate's In the Realm of Hungry Ghosts, which discusses his interactions with addictions to both substances and behaviours. Whilst listening to the audiobook version one day, it occurred to me that Mate's definition of addiction was similar to upholding a destructive value. Call it an addiction or not. At this point, I'd like to highlight that I'm not saying that all addictions or addictive tendencies are held equal, and I'm also not an expert in the field. I'm just merely sharing an aha moment with you. That said, I find Mate's definition of addiction very useful for the purposes of this lecture. To quote, "Addictions are endeavours at controlling our life experiences with the help of external remedies. No external remedy improves our condition without at the same time making it worse, or a harmful action imposed on the self, seemingly out of one's control. This appears to be a substance dependence definition. However, external remedies can be considered to mean anything used as a distraction from the root issue. I would like to point out that I'm focusing on what would be considered behavioural addiction for the purposes of this talk. Things like consuming products you logically know are causing you harm, yet you do nothing. Slapping on makeup and hair products you know will fade in a matter of hours whilst poisoning your body and psychological well-being. The list of possible examples is literally endless. Essentially, does it cause harm to you or society? If so, scrap it and move on. But how? A great 4-step plan is highlighted in the Realm of Hungry Ghosts, and it struck me as useful when trying to figure out how to change our more toxic values. You need to first be aware of the toxic value and decide you want to change it. Whilst not masking itself as a quick fix guide, it requires much dedication, and I'm sure it can come in handy. Step 1, relabel. Marketing companies have had thrill of a ride merging our concepts of needs versus wants over the years. Working for a busy coffee chain, I often experience moments of internal head shaking when someone tells me they need a latte or some other product offered. Call it semantics if you like, but I'm certain it runs deeper than that. Do we really deep down not know how to distinguish between these two things? Of course we do, provided we put the energy into questioning ourselves. The purpose of this step is to reassign the term want to its correct place in our lives, an option. Relabeling causes you to invoke the external spectator, meaning the capacity to stand outside yourself and watch yourself in action. Mate states that essential to this step is conscious awareness. We must catch ourselves misusing these terms. The more we catch ourselves making this mistake, the more we encourage our brain patterns to change. The brain circuits want to take the easiest path possible, and existing one is preferable to having to reroute it. However, repetition forces the old circuits to weaken and the new ones to become the easy route. Step 2, reattribute. Having learnt that we are all products of our conditioning, society's effect on our brain development from a neutral through to present day, it is not surprising to hear that the needs which are harmful to us are rooted deep in brain activity. In this step, you state very clearly where that perceived need originated. It could be that it represents dopamine or endorphin hunger on the part of the brain systems that early in your life lacked the necessary conditions for their full development. It could also represent emotional needs that went unsatisfied. Reattribution is directly linked with questioning why it has such a powerful hold over you. When does it rear its ugly head? Is it when you're stressed? Bored? This compulsion says nothing about you as a person. It is not so much a moral failure or character weakness, it could just be the effect of circumstances over which you had no control. However, if you change your response to those old circuits, you will eventually weaken them. Step 3, refocus. This step is all about regaining control of your brain, or at least attempting to. This is probably the toughest step in my opinion, since I think it requires the most work. Your vice may be incredibly powerful and seemingly impossible to resist. It is not permanent. It can be changed. It is not how you feel that counts, it is what you do. This basically means finding something else to do when compulsion strikes. If you just have to go and buy that cell phone that makes pancakes, go for a walk or arrange to meet friends. Whatever, it really doesn't matter as long as it's something that you enjoy. The whole point of this is to show your brain who's in charge and that you don't have to submit to the pull. You can choose something else. The first time you do this, aim to distract yourself for a reasonable amount of time. Then when you complete it, record it as a success. Next time, try distracting yourself a little longer. Old habits die hard, after all. Remain aware of slipping and why it happens. Step 4, revalue. As Mate points out, this step would be better called devalue, since the point is to put the impact of your value into context. This does not simply mean how the value has affected you, but the people close to you and even society as a whole. It is because of this negative impact that you have decided to change. Devalue the activity and assign it its true value, nothing. How has it benefited you? Are those reasons rational? Maybe think about a recent time you've experienced a sensation that causes you to uphold a knowingly problematic value. How does it make you feel? Are you really happy? It's a good way of gathering information which may help you to learn what's driving the value you hold so dear. Part 3. Personal struggle with an addictive behavioural value. Body image. One of the main ways I've been affected in my life and the barriers I continually put up to my ability to embrace it and free myself is my concern with body image. As a girl, it is expected that you have issues around this topic, ranging from body weight to boob or ass size, either too big or too small, depending on cultural expectation. The media in our society does a good job of telling us how we should look, if we're aware of it, or if it exists on a more subliminal level, regardless of impact on health, both physical and mental well-being. We only need to look around a short time to find someone so distorted by this Western culture to locate the victim of an eating disorder or someone who has undergone a type of cosmetic surgery simply to feel better or more validated as a human being, rather than for medical necessity. For me, despite being a healthy weight that generally fluctuates only moderately, I cannot wear a bikini, something not easily avoidable living so close to the beach. In the past few years, I've been trying to focus my energy in general on getting better mentally. This includes questioning my values and considering the impact of those values on my psychological health and those closest to me. So, fortunately for me, I'm in a healthy relationship with somebody who provides me with a safe and non-judgmental environment with which I can completely open up. The first body insecurity I decided to challenge was my usage of makeup. I have always wanted to genuinely feel beautiful naturally, and I have never been one to apply foundation with a trowel. However, I also felt a few cosmetics helped and were necessary. My partner would often tell me that he preferred me without it, but of course he's biased. Then I watched a video from the people who made the story of stuff. It's about the cosmetic industry. Okay, I thought, I'm putting toxic chemicals on my face, especially worrying to be using on the sensitive eye areas, and I'm ironically harming myself and my self-esteem at the same time. Why am I doing this? However, slowly I have succeeded in reducing the amount that I wear. These days I'll only occasionally wear mascara if I'm feeling nervous, or like others will be judging me, for example. But back to the physical body element, no bikinis for me. One day, 2 summers ago, my partner challenged me to accompany him to Wreck Beach, a local nudist beach for those of you who aren't aware. I assume his intention was to show me the variety of body shapes and the confidence that beholds such a place. And man, was he right. My first visit, I think I took my sweater off. It's the height of the summer, I might point out, and that's about it. I was the judgmental person that caused my body image value paralysis. Whoa, his penis is tiny. Oh, what saggy boobs, etc. It took me a while of being there to get past my judgments before I was filled with respect for these people and their comfort towards being nude. I wanted to join, but my value paralysis crippled my ability to act. So, after my initiation, we left. We returned a few weeks later with some much needed good old Dutch courage. I was going to participate. We managed to find a sufficiently secluded area and I sat there, got drunk, and donned the old bikini. Success! No one could see me, but it was a great first step. Being the man my other half is, though, time to push the boundaries a little further. Everything off. I think I was shaking with nervousness and adrenaline all at the same time. I did it. It felt so great to face this value distortion. Companies like clothing, cosmetics, in fact any visual aid stores, require on people feeling crappy and unhappy with themselves. If people had the confidence they rightly deserve, these industries would become obsolete. So, to bring back to the 4-step plan, relabel. Is my fear rational? Looking at other people with seemingly worse bodies being free and comfortable, am I that bad? isn't a rational belief, it doesn't appear to conform with reality, boom. Reattribute. I don't know the root cause of this issue. It's likely an accumulation of many influences. My brain has found an easy route, the one it's been using for so long. Oh, brain of mine, why do you haunt me so? I'm not a failure, merely a victim of my brain. Refocus. Graduated exposure. Go to the nudist beach, judge like a motherfucker. Apologies if you were at the beach that day, I was judging the crap out of you, highlighting all the flaws that I've been conditioned to think you have. I was the bitch that causes me to feel judged. Got drunk, bikini, nude, repeat, hopefully. Revalue. How does this affect my life? Seldomly wear a bikini. Only where I'm certain no one will know who I am. Baggy clothing so as not to show any hint of bulge. It not only affects me but my partner, and also I'm unintentionally adding to other members of society's problems by enforcing this distortion. Part 4. Link between value changes and a healthy society. As I have previously alluded to, change only appears to occur under certain circumstances, or at least the transition is easier. Okay, so let's think about the values that we hold that are corruptive to ourselves, the people around us, or just generally internally inconsistent, or are inconsistent with what we know in the scientific sense. This society we live in is hell-bent on separating us in so many ways. Unnecessarily induced sense of competition, to a separation from the earth we all belong to. We are taught black and white dualities from capitalist, communist, to attractive, unattractive, rich, poor, basically in every way you can imagine. Let's ask ourselves, how would values look in a healthy society that focuses its attention on the collective well-being and sustainability of our home? A resource-based economy stipulates the use of the scientific method for social concern. We have amazing capabilities in the fields of science and technology, hindered currently by the monetary market system. But is that all it takes for us to advance to a better system? Aren't our values also a major factor in transition? As is so frequently illustrated, a person from this society would function as successfully in an RBE as would an Amazonian being dropped in the middle of Times Square. Our value systems need to reflect reality as far as possible. Values not supported by society struggle to flourish. We all have work to do. Are you ready?
Brent, you're up next!
What will it take to wake us up? Remember the stories your parents used to tell you about Santa Claus and the Easter Bunny, and the way that if you worked really hard, you could do anything you want to do. You can be anything you really want to be. Perhaps your father and your grandfather would tell you stories about how when they were young, they would just finish school. They didn't even have to finish school. They would just walk across town to the factory, and they would get in at the bottom level. And they'd work hard, and they'd work themselves up to management level. And they could retire at that position. Just working hard. They could do it again if they had to, even. Anybody could do it. That 27% depression level unemployment that we hear about in Western Europe, that's just because those people over there are lazy. If they just knew how to work hard, it wouldn't be like that. It's so simple. It's just black and white. Honestly, the story has changed a little recently. Parents tell the kids that you should go to university. If you want a good white-collar job, you have to go to university. Do what you love, though. They say don't go to university just for the money. You don't want to work in a job just for the money. Most of my servers here at my restaurant have degrees from universities and colleges, and they're working here for the money. My head dishwasher has 2 degrees from one of the top universities in the country. Oh, is that a resume for me?
Yes.
I'm busy right now. Just put it on the end of the bar with the other resumes I've received today. Not that pile. That's for the Red Seal chefs that applied today. Not the next one. That's for the new chefs that just graduated culinary school. No, those are the server resumes. The big one on the end, that's for the dishwashers, the tallest one. Yeah, perfect, good. I'll take a look at it soon, thanks. When the news talks about unemployment levels, does that include the underemployed, the people who can't find work in the field they were trained in, and instead they're working as baristas. No offense, Stephen. You're a great barista. There's many talented baristas working, but is that a career that anybody wants to retire on, work their life on, or retire on? Do those unemployment numbers include the people that have stopped looking for work? How many resumes can you hand out before you realize that there's just no jobs out there? Don't worry, they say the economy will turn around. It always does. You'll see the jobs will come back. Where did the jobs go? There's no one villain. There are a number of causes that are creating this snowball effect that we see. Technological unemployment, as the traditional jobs are being replaced by automation and computers. There's the offshoring of manufacturing and technical work like software programming, well, that gets sent overseas. There's the changing economic conditions as governments become so burdened by debt they have to change the taxes, they have to do cutbacks, labor rates are changing. There's all of those things. But don't worry, they say, Adam Smith's invisible hand will create new jobs. The market is self-regulating. Hey Tony, don't worry about that job at the post office you were laid off from when they brought in that new technology and automated things and made things more efficient. They're creating new jobs in India. So train up and move out. Your family's gonna love living in Mumbai. Wait a minute. If my customers are moving overseas, what will my restaurant do? How am I gonna survive? Well, I'm not going to worry about it because I'm sure the invisible hand is going to work out for me and my family too. New businesses are streamlining and replacing manual work, and this is a good thing. No one really wants to work at boring jobs that machines can do better. It's evolution. Nothing can stop new, more efficient ideas. If Corporation A decides for moral reasons that to not adopt the new technology, instead they're going to keep the jobs, that's fine, but Corporation B is going to adopt the new technology and they're going to reduce their costs, they're going to give better prices to the market, and Corporation A won't be able to compete. So then they will force to either have to downsize their labor force, or they're going to have to adopt that new technology, and that will eliminate labor as well. So all outcomes result in fewer jobs. It's past time that society takes a hard look at itself. If a monetary-based economy is based on paid labor, that labor must always be available and increasing as our population increases. Instead, us clever humans are innovating exponentially and as we reduce and remove our dependency on paid labor. And this is the fatal flaw. In a monetary-based economy, if we can't work, we can't get paid. And if we can't get paid, we can't access the resources that we need. And if we can't access the resources we need, we can't help support our local economies. And if the economy suffers, then more jobs disappear. The whole thing starts to fall apart and it begins a downward spiral. Is that what it will take to wake us up? Are we so self-absorbed that we need to suffer personally? Then we're too busy to see the road we're on. The accelerator is stuck on the floor, and we're too busy arguing about who gets to ride shotgun on the next ride. We're living in historic times. In the future, people will look back on us right now, and they'll ask, if it was so obvious, why didn't we do anything about it? How will they answer that question? Will they say they were too busy working or trying to find work? They had the technology, the resources, the knowledge to eliminate most work, to eliminate most crime, to eliminate poverty, and give everyone a standard of living that they could only dream of. But they were too proud to look at themselves hard, to look at themselves critically, to see the road that they're on. Instead, they just keep repeating the mantra, keep calm and carry on, as they watch their society slowly collapse.
And up next, we're excited to present an interview with Dr. Gabor Mate.
Thank you very much for agreeing to do this interview with us. Let's get right to it. I know you touch upon this a lot throughout your work, but can you touch upon the still pervasive beliefs regarding genetic determinism? That is, the genes cause behavior, determine illness. And I guess the second part of the question is, what would you have to say to people like Steven Pinker or others in the fields of evolutionary psychology who don't even mention gene interaction environments, gene environment interaction and epigenetics?
Well, with every other intellectual discipline, this one too has its ideological aspects. And as I've made the point before, in a society where the environment on the one hand is very toxic to people, both physically and emotionally, it's very useful to pretend that everything is caused by genes, because then we don't have to look at the toxic effects from the environment. The actual reality is that genes are turned on and off by the environment. A study out of University of British Columbia last year showed that the genetic function of teenagers, they looked at 150 different genes, 120 were affected by stress on the mother when the child was very small in the first couple of years of life. 30 were affected by stress on the father when the child was in the preschool years. Wow. In other words, in the early years, it's the mother's stresses that will affect the genetic functioning of kids. And later on, as the father gains more importance in the child's life, then his stresses will start affecting the kids. In other words, that's what's called an epigenetic effect, where the environment turns the gene on and off. And this is not even controversial. It's been shown over and over again, so that there's very few diseases that are genetically determined. No behaviors are genetically determined. Behaviors are very complex manifestations of physiological and psychological dynamics, none of which are genetically determined. It's really a matter of how the environment affects the genes in their expression, in their activation or inactivation. And we actually are working out the mechanisms of where genes are actually activated or deactivated by the environment. So whether it comes to mental illness or a physical illness or behaviors, even when you can show that there's some genetic predisposition, it still doesn't mean that there's going to be a predetermination. And you can look at this in identical twins. A recent study on identical twins and breast cancer. They had the same genes, but if one gene had the disease, the other gene had if one twin had the disease, the breast cancer, they both had the breast cancer gene, but one twin had the disease, the other one had less than a 50% chance of also having the disease. Mm-hmm. If the gene determined the disease, they both would have had it. I'm talking about identical twins when both actually carry the same gene. So clearly there's an environmental effect.
Certainly. I guess a follow-up would be, can you see how the genetic determinism myth is very much runs in support with the establishment, meaning it's in their favor to prolong this belief?
Well, you can see that in the media, that whenever somebody discovers or thinks they do the gene for this or that behavior, it's front page news. 5 years later, when the study is invalidated and refuted, it's back on the bottom of page 20 in small print.
That's a good point.
So that they keep playing up the genetic factor. They're very excited about that, because again, it supports the status quo. And one just sees this all the time.
Yeah. So while many people don't use the genetic argument, they use another powerful belief, that is that human beings have free choice or free will, implying that they themselves are the uncaused cause of their destiny.
Yeah.
So do we really have free will in this sense?
We have free will if we're conscious. But to the extent that we're not conscious, our choices are determined by unconscious factors. In which case, how can we talk about free will? So, big article in the New York Times this week about how junk foods are addictive and how subtly and cleverly they're marketed to appeal to certain brain circuits. Well, you can't say that somebody who's emotionally divorced from themselves and largely unconscious of their motivations, and furthermore is being manipulated by subtle commercialization is making any kind of a free choice when it comes to junk food. Theoretically they are, but in practice they're driven by forces they're not even aware of. So that Eckhart Tolle says that without consciousness you can't talk about free will. So the idea of free will is very relative. We have free will to the degree that A, we are conscious, and B, real choice is available to us. Now, you can put a rat in a cage and give it 3 different kind of foods, and you might say that he's got free will in terms of deciding which food he's going to eat, but if one of them is sprinkled with material whose smell the rat hates, you can no longer say that the rat is free to choose it, because he's being driven by his biological drive there to stay away from that particular thing. Besides, he's in a cage and he's only got 3 choices. So this idea of choice, it's relative. It's very, very relative. So and not only that, one more thing. We talk about in politics about free choice. You can vote for the party of your choice, but people are propagandized to believe that there's only certain choices that are acceptable.
Right.
So how can you talk about free choice? So we have free elections in Canada. Anybody can run, but not anybody's free to win, because most people are totally propagandized to believe that genuine choice lies within a very narrow range. So you can actually pick which servant of the establishment you wish to see in power for the next 4 years. But the establishment never runs for power. You know, the corporate elite never says, elect us, we'd like to run the world. They just do. And the politicians then reflect a very narrow range of opinions of which way to best serve the corporate agenda. And anybody who doesn't want to will not get media coverage, or will get hostile media coverage. And then we talk about free elections. What's free about them?
Yeah.
It's free only in a sense that nobody's beating on the head, as they did in, say, the communist dictatorships, or under Nazi Germany. So there's that relative freedom, but it's not real freedom.
Yeah.
Because people aren't free to be conscious of any other alternatives.
So it seems the key then is in understanding the complex chain of causality that leads to decisions. So would that mean that there really isn't any free will in any sense? I mean, even if you're conscious of the choice, we might not be conscious of all the complex variables that caused us to be conscious of to decide.
Well, all one can say is that the more aware you are, the more conscious you are, the more freedom you have. But even then, that freedom is constrained within a certain social milieu.
Right.
You know, so I could say that I'm free not to buy products that are tainted by the exploitation of human beings or the degradation of the environment. But where exactly am I going to find such products?
Exactly.
You know,
not too many products left.
No, there's not too many products left. So then, you know, what freedom do I have?
Right.
In that sense.
Very good. So just changing gears slightly here. Throughout your work, you discuss the causal links between stress and a myriad of public health disorders, ranging from cancer to ADD to addiction and mental illness. And we also see a multitude of studies illustrating a causal link between deteriorating nutritional content in people's diets and these very same health disorders. So my question is, I guess, how are you able to distinguish between these two variables, stress and poor diets, or other variables that may relate to these public health problems?
Well, what you can certainly say is that the greater the stress and the poorer the diet, the greater the risk of illness. Beyond that, there's lots of people who eat a perfectly healthy diet and who still get sick, and who exercise, whose body weight is perfect, who are very conscious of healthy eating. When they get sick, my experience is almost always purely stress. But certainly the more factors add up that would undermine my health, the greater the risk of illness. So it's not one or the other. And of course, nor is food and eating and stress separate issues. Nor are they separate issues, because the people who are most likely to eat terribly are the ones who are most stressed. A, because they tend to be the poorest, and B, stress itself is relieved by eating junk foods. So the more stressed you are, the more likely to eat fatty stuff or sugary stuff, because temporarily they make you feel better. So then, which causes you illness? It doesn't matter.
Right.
The real issue is, how can we be conscious of a healthy diet, and how can we be conscious of dealing with stress in a powerful way?
Very good. And on that note, addiction, of course, is one of your areas of specialty, specifically in understanding the root causes of it. And in this sick culture we live in, there are many institutions that prey on people's vulnerabilities of addiction. What would you say about institutions like organized religion, which often replace people's addiction with simply another addiction?
Well, anything can be addictive. So that one can attend church in a spiritual way. One can even belong to an organized religion, whether it be Islam or Christianity or in its various manifestations, or Judaism or Hinduism or Sikhism. One can attend any of these organized religious institutions and events in a purely spiritual way. Or one can be simply serving one's need to belong and for acceptance and to give up personal responsibility and to belong to a structure, or to fill your emptiness with some external stuff. So there are people inside all of these religious traditions that can be spiritually free, and many others are spiritually quite blind, who are simply being manipulated. But the basic point is that any activity, even meditation, even exercise, anything can be addictive. It's not the behavior so much as your internal relationship to it. And now, some things are more addictive than others. So certainly there are some people who become religious addicts. And by that I mean is that they give up their true selves in order to belong, in order to accept a certain ideology, because they're so uncomfortable with themselves, they need it replaced by something from the outside. And then they no longer have free choice.
Right. So this question is regarding social reformation, a topic that inevitably arises when identifying and articulating the true root causes of many mental health disorders, public health disorders that you do, and the main question we deal with in the Zeitgeist movement. So I know this question's of enormous magnitude, but what sort of society would you envision that at its core would promote optimal physical and mental well-being?
Well, the first thing I would say is that it doesn't really matter what kind of society I would envision, because society is not asking me what it should be like. I don't think social change arises out of people envisioning a different system. I think it's a much more organic process. But having said that, I've come to understand that human beings are basically built for love and connection, for cooperation, for support, for compassion, for openness, for peace. That's our true nature. Everything else is a distortion of human nature, of our true nature. So we can be extremely cruel, extremely violent, extremely aggressive, extremely destructive to ourselves, others, and the environment. But that's not who we are. That's a distortion of who we are, because at some level, at some point, our true needs were not met, our true needs were not honored or understood or valued. So I can envision a society where people's true nature is actually the highest value. Now, as soon as you put anything else, like in the Ten Commandments, when God says, "I'm a jealous God, thou shalt have no other gods before me," He's not talking about a personal petty jealousy. But what is actually being said there is that as long as we put anything else above truth, we're going to create suffering. So that if you put anything higher than the truth, you're going to create suffering for yourself or others. So I can envision a society in which people actually honor the truth of who they are and the truth of other people are and the truth of what nature is. Now, we could discuss what the organization of the society would be and all that, and what the economics of it would be. But I certainly see that not only as possible, but eventually even as inevitable, assuming that we survive what we're doing to ourselves right now.
Right.
But I don't see it as inevitable in any kind of the short term. But I think it's totally possible.
Certainly. And my last question is about your upcoming proposed book, Toxic Culture.
Yeah.
Can you share anything about that with our viewers? Perhaps generally what you'll be discussing and when, if ever, we could expect it to hit shelves?
Well, first of all, I don't know when I'll be writing it. I'll decide if I'll write it. I'll need the inspiration, I'll need the space, and I need to create the space for the inspiration to occur if it's going to.
Mm-hmm.
But the thesis is very simple. If it was discovered that there was something in the drinking water that's poisoning a lot of people, that's creating cancer and rheumatoid arthritis and schizophrenia and depression and anxiety, and it's making more and more kids ill and dysfunctional and more adults debilitated. If it was discovered that there was such a substance in the drinking water, we would immediately take steps to eliminate that particle from our drinking water. Well, I'm saying that we live in a culture that makes people sick, that because of its denial of human need, because of its insistence that material possession and profit is a higher value than the environment, higher than people's joy in this life, because of its confusion of wealth with happiness. We actually live in a society that is toxic to the people that live in it. Mm-hmm. It's toxic not just to the people at the bottom, but even to the people at the top. But they don't know that it's toxic. Now, it's more toxic to the people at the bottom. In the United States, the life expectancy, the discrepancy between the people at the top and the people at the bottom is 20 years.
Oh, I didn't know it was that high.
No, that means that people are being poisoned. They die 20 years earlier than they should. Now, if you discovered that toxin in the drinking water, would you not want to take it out?
Absolutely.
And I'm saying that's the nature of this society. It actually kills people before their time. Let alone all the people that it kills around the world because we're destroying the environment, because of the hunger that we create through our control of their resources and the cash crops and all the things that are too well known for me to have to talk about. So that it's a very toxic culture. And for all this wealth and for all the advances in medicine and hygiene and all that, which have really been very important, by its very nature, at the same time, it's killing people and making them ill. So that's what I mean by toxic culture.
Wonderful. Thank you very much for the interview. It was a pleasure.
My pleasure too, thanks.
Thank you.